Ladies and gentlemen, it's the late night birthday edition of Offside Hockey Talk, and we got a special guest. Adam Kimelman's joining us to talk about the 2023 NHL entry draft, talk about what the Leafs may or may not do, and a few other things we'll run through as well. But before we go any further, I want to introduce my co-host, as always, Mr. Pete the Heat. How's it going tonight?
Yeah, it's going well. Late night, but we're here. We're ready to go.
We're fired up on the East Coast, that's for sure. And then, of course, Adam Kimelman, thank you so much for dropping by. Let everybody know, where are you from? If people don't know, they should know. But, hey, you know what? Sometimes people don't see everything.
Well, I am deputy managing editor of NHL.com, so I've been there since 2007, covering, I'm based out of Philadelphia, so I'm covering a lot of stuff with the Philadelphia Flyers. In addition, I also spend a lot of time covering the draft. So I've done that every year since 2008.
Wow. There you go. So the coverage right there. So working for NHL.com obviously comes with its perks, some bells, some whistles. What is your favorite part of the job? I mean, working at NHL.com, is it getting to talk to players, getting to interview people? What is it for you?
Well, it's just being able to build that relationship with players and with teams because, we're media sort of, and I got to put it kind of in air quotes because we're not the same as what you would get from your local newspaper or from Sportsnet or TSN, where they're breaking news and really digging and hunting for things. We're more reactionary, and when the clubs announce it, we'll announce and react to it. So it's a little bit of a different thing, but at the same time, when players or coaches or managers know I'm asking them a question, they can say things to me and not have to worry about it ending up on Twitter or some other social media or in the newspaper on a website. They know if they say something sensitive to me, they know it's going to be kept in some level of privacy. So it's sort of that balance where we don't get the breaking news hits of someone like a Darren Dreger or a Bob McKenzie, but at the same time, there's a certain comfort level that our sources have with us because of who we are and who we work for.
Now, obviously getting that information and keeping it under wraps and just being able to kind of know things before things happen. Has there ever been a situation where something has been told to you and you're just like, man, if I could just once just break this would be fun, because it's just one of those things that's so tantalizing?
Yeah, more often than people probably realize. And it's something that I'm never going to really put out into the public. But yes, there are things I hear, things I see, things I know that, for multiple reasons, I can't put out into the public sphere.
Oh, yeah.
However, but again, it's nice for the people that I know that they feel comfortable saying certain things around me with the trust of, my reputation from, not just working for the NHL, but I've been covering the NHL since 2002. So I have a pretty good reputation amongst the players I cover, the coaches I cover, guys coming into the league know me before they get drafted into the NHL. So, I've established a foundation. There's that trust that I have with certain guys who are now coaches and managers who I covered as players. So it's pretty fun that way.
Awesome.
Go ahead, Pete.
I was going to say, I was browsing your Twitter bio, and I noticed you've written 3 books about the Philadelphia Flyers. Did you want to elaborate on that? Expand?
Sure. Yeah. Well, yeah. They're. I'm trying to think. The first one came out before I started working for the NHL back in 2008. You can still get it. We updated it in 2013. It's The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly: The History of the Philadelphia Flyers. So that counts as 2 because we did there. There is new material in the second one. This great cover photo of I don't know if you guys remember Jason Smith. He is an assistant. I believe he's an assistant. He was an assistant with the Ottawa Senators. I don't think he's there now.
I remember him.
Great picture of blood dripping down his face, just really saying kind of everything you need to say about Philadelphia Flyers. And there's another one, 100 Things Every Flyers Fan Should Know and Do Before They Die. Just, I'm biased, but I think they're fantastic. And just The Flyers are more than just a regional team. I think there's Flyers fans in all corners of the hockey world because of just who they are and their history and the things that they've won. And people still reminisce fondly about the Broad Street Bullies, even though it's coming up on 50 years ago. There's still that allure to them that all these years later, through multiple generations, kind of lasts. So there is some real interest on a national level about what the Flyers are and who they are and what they've done and what they're doing.
Yeah, I can attest that the Philadelphia Flyer reach is really strong. I got two really good buddies that are Flyers fans who love to give me the gears, especially a couple seasons ago when the Flyers actually passed the Leafs in points. I made the bet, obviously thinking with guys like Austin Matthews and the likes, that there's no way the Philadelphia Flyers would surpass the Maple Leafs. And sure enough, they did finish higher in the standings. So that one kind of sucked. But hey, again, now the Flyers are in this realm. We'll talk about them for just a moment. Where they're selling things off. Danny Briere looks like he does not care what he lays down on the table here. He's going to make the moves that he feels are the right ones. And you've already seen a Provorov go out. You're hearing whispers of Carter Hart, Travis Konechny. I want to ask you quickly, a lot of teams are licking their chops right now because there's some players on the Flyers that really would look good in different uniforms. And I mean, as Leaf fans, we look at a guy like Travis Konechny, even though he went after one of our boys in Austin Matthews, he'd still look good in the blue and white doing that to another team. I'm wondering for you, looking at the Flyers right now, do you foresee them really stripping it down to scorched earth and building it back up around the young players like a Cam York and the other ones that are there as well?
Well, I think there's a couple of schools of thought there, and Danny Briere sort of has been open and adamant about this. There's no sacred cows on that roster. If you want somebody, call me. I'm listening in on anybody. It doesn't mean he's necessarily going to move on anybody. If somebody picks up the phone and calls him and says, hey, we have X, Y, and Z if you want to trade Carter Hart. And, I don't think he's actively shopping someone like Carter Hart or Travis Konechny. But if somebody calls, he's not going to ignore the phone call. So,
That's for sure, yeah.
you don't know what's out there. You don't know how other teams value your players unless you listen in on those calls. So, we've already saw it with Ivan Provorov, whether it's Travis Konechny, Carter Hart, anybody else, he said he's open for business. The Philadelphia Flyers are willing to make moves and do things that they think they need to do to get them back to being where they want to be, which is contending for, Stanley Cup playoffs and the Stanley Cup. So where they are right now is not, in their minds, not acceptable. So, when you have a roster that has finished as far down as they have in the standings for, 2 years running, 3 years running now, you have to be aggressive and you have to consider all options, and that's where they are.
Now, I'll ask this about the Flyers because we all know what the Philly fan base is like. Can they stomach a full type rebuild, or is it at the point now in Philly where they're ready for it and want it?
Well, I think they want a winner. Whatever route you take to deliver a winner, being at the home games the last couple of years, if you're worried about fans in the building, well, there haven't been fans in the building very much. The attendance has been very light. You can just watch the games and look in the stands and you can see, a lot of empty seats. So they want a winning team and they're in very much a show me position. Show me that you're going to build a winning team. Show me that you can win games on a consistent basis. Show me that you can build a playoff contender. When you do that, we'll start coming back. So whether the fan base can stomach a rebuild or not is irrelevant. It's what you are right now. And what they are right now is a team in need of a rebuild and a team in need of more talent, more skill. And that's been expressed from all levels of the organization, and that's what they're trying to accumulate. And you mentioned the Ivan Provorov trade. The big return on that was the first round pick in this year's draft. So now they've got 2 kicks at it, 7 and 22 in a very deep draft, and that's going to enable them to continue building up their prospect base.
All right, that's fair enough. And we'll spin it towards the draft here now. You say deep draft here, so I want to ask you, what does your top 5 look like? Because we spoke yesterday with Jerome Berube, who said, I heard you talk about Adam Fantilli not even an hour ago when I was listening to one of the shows that you were on. Actually, I think it's your own show, taking him second overall. I've heard, the Swedish, I believe, Swedish player going
Leo
second overall. I
Carlson.
don't remember his name top of my
Leo
head. Sorry,
Carlson.
guys. Yeah,
Leo
running on
Carlson.
no sleep over here. But I've heard him going second overall due to more hockey sense. Hockey IQ is higher with him than Adam Fantilli. Where Adam Fantilli, you know what you're getting, but it's more of a one driven direction, and maybe the compete level is not as high. So I'm wondering for you, what's your top 5, and I guess what gives you the edge for Fantilli at 2?
Well, first of all, I think it's sort of a no-brainer that Connor Bedard's going to go number 1 to the Chicago Blackhawks, and we had Connor as well as Blackhawks amateur scouting director Mike Dunahee on our NHL Draft Class podcast, just kind of talking about, obviously they're not going to. Chicago isn't going to say yes, we're taking Bedard at this point, but it would be pretty tough to imagine them not moving in that direction. And for me, Adam Fantilli absolutely is the number 2 pick. I think he, in a year without a Connor Bedard, I think he'd be easily the number 1 choice. Just because, you look at an 18-year-old going into the NCAA playing against 23, 24, 25-year-old men, but 24 and 25-year-old, far older, more developed competition, and he dominated. He led the NCAA in points, tied for the lead in goals, won the Hobey Baker Award, got his team to the Frozen Four. He was an elite player from the minute he walked in the door. But then you also look at what he did in the World Juniors and the World Championship for Canada, where he was shifted more to a bottom 6 role on the wing, and he still was able to find his niche, produce. He scored the game-winning goal against the U.S. in the semifinals of the World Juniors, scored one of the great goals, one of the more highlight reel goals of the World Championship. So when you look at that level of versatility, he's not going to be a bottom 6 guy in the NHL when he establishes himself.
You think he cracks the lineup?
I think he's due back for one more season in NCAA hockey, which is only going to help him. Yeah. But if it's Anaheim, if it's number 2, you're talking about a guy who's going to be able to step in, be a top 2 center, probably right off the hop, because he'll have, he has the one thing that Connor Bedard does not have. And that's a 6'2", 195-pound frame, which is probably going to be closer to 200 pounds, if not over 200 pounds, by the time he gets to the NHL. And then you add the skill, the head for the game, the shot, all the things you want to see in a player. Adam Fantilli has it, so he will be able to step into an NHL lineup in a prime role, and most likely be able to produce right off the top when he reaches the NHL. For the 24-25 season.
Okay. We talk about Connor Bedard and a little bit about the size. We just touched on it there. We'll switch gears just back to him for just a moment. Do you see that being a problem for him until he's able to maybe establish himself a little bit more, maybe put on a couple more pounds? I mean, maybe he's not done growing either. Gets a little bit more size to him. Or, we all saw the shots of him being all gronked out on the bike and everything like that, the muscles ripped to shreds, like a beast. But I'm wondering, the NHL is a different level. It's a different kettle of fish. This guy coming into I'm just wondering, is it going to be too much for him too soon, especially on a Chicago team that doesn't have talent around him really right now?
Right. I think if you look at what Patrick Kane did at age 18 when he came into the NHL, I think if you look at what Jack Hughes did at age 18 when they came into the NHL, they were able to pick their spots and be productive. They weren't what they became until year 3. Yeah. So, I think if you expect Connor Bedard to come in and have a 70-goal, 140-point season like he did this year in Regina, I think your expectations are out of whack. However, I think he is strong enough, I think he's smart enough, and I think he's skilled enough that you're not going to see him get physically dominated or get physically overmatched. Will there be nights when maybe he doesn't look his best, where, a bigger, stronger guy is able to knock him off of where he wants to be? For sure. But that's no different than any other 18, 19-year-old. Yeah. I think in due time, Connor Bedard will be an elite player in the NHL. And I think you watch how Patrick Kane progressed year 1, year 2, year 3. You watch how Jack Hughes progressed year 1, 2, 3. Johnny Gaudreau, kind of the same thing. I think you're going to see Connor Bedard become an elite player. Will it happen at 18? Probably not, but I don't think it's going to take him too long to be considered one of the top players in the NHL.
Oh, Chicago fans just got really, really excited with that one. And I mean, there was some rumblings too I don't know what Barbashev's going to do with the Vegas Golden Knights if he resigns there or not, but that might be a type of player you link up with Connor Bedard to give a little nastiness edge and, just more grit to play beside him. And the guy could still contribute as well. Might help Connor Bedard along in his first season. Be interesting to see what Chicago does for him.
Well, yeah, they need to surround him with talent. Look, Connor McDavid's not able to do it by himself. Sidney Crosby wasn't able to do it by himself. Alex Ovechkin wasn't able to do it by himself. It's not just one guy who's able to dominate and carry a team from where Chicago is now to where they want to be. Like it wasn't Patrick Kane by himself winning those 3 Stanley Cups. It took a lot of help for him to get there. And, the same thing right now. It's not going to be Connor Bedard's not going to land in Chicago and suddenly make them, the Central Division champion and a contender for the Stanley Cup. They need to add pieces around him. And that's the job now of Kyle Davidson and that staff there in Chicago you've won the lottery, literally and figuratively, with Connor Bedard. Well, now you need to put in the real work, which is surrounding Connor Bedard with talent that he can elevate and that will also elevate him.
Well, that's fair. Well, we've talked to a few people about the draft here, and you touched on it maybe being a deeper draft. I've heard it maybe not being so deep, maybe middle of the level in terms of what you might get after the 15th pick, which is almost a lot of drafts, but this one not being as deep as others. What do you think there? Do you think this is a true deep draft where the first round really could produce talent for teams, as soon as maybe not this year, but next? With guys stepping in, or is it a middle of class kind of draft?
I think if you ask me that same question 5, 6, 7 years from now, I think the answer will be several foundational players, all-star level guys. This is a very, very deep draft. It's one of the more talented drafts that I've been a part of, and I've been doing this since 2008. We mentioned Bedard and Fantilli. I think Leo Carlsson, who I have going number 3 in my mock draft, has a chance to be an outstanding top-end franchise center. Is Will Smith, the U.S. national team player, I think has outstanding talent, whether he plays in the middle or on the wing. He's got that game-breaking ability that, is going to pull you out of your seat. I talked to scouts about Will Smith, and the reply was whether he had a hat trick or whether he didn't have a point, you very rarely left the building saying he wasn't the best player on the ice. So that tells you all you need to know. And then Matvei Michkov, the Russian player, who really is the wild card of this draft because he could go, anywhere in the top. Geez, I can't imagine him slipping much past the top 7 or top 8. But he's another one with elite level skill, elite level ability that, if we weren't having the situation that we're in, we might be talking about 2 generational players in Bedard and Michkov versus just one. So Michkov, from a raw skill perspective, is as close to Bedard as anybody else in this year's draft. But there are issues beyond the skill that leave some question marks. So I have him going at number 5 in my mock draft, but he could go anywhere. He could go as high as number 2. It depends on the team and the patience, and are they willing to can they handle all the outside noise surrounding Michkov and not to, starting with the 3 years he has left on his KHL contract. So you have to be willing to be patient to wait for that contract to play out. Then you wonder, can you get him over here? But if you're in a position, and that's why I think the Montreal Canadiens are the perfect fit for him, because they have already started to assemble a really nice young core. You look at Caulfield and Suzuki and Doc and Slavkovsky, and what they've added on the back end with Gooley and Barron and Jordan Harris. Those guys are just sort of hitting their prime. In another 3 years, they're going to be at their top level. And then you would maybe add in a 22-year-old Matvei Michkov with, by then, 4 years of KHL experience on an entry-level contract, which is also key. That, to me, the timeline fits for where Montreal is in their build if they were to add a player like Michkov. But there's not a team in the NHL he couldn't help based on what I've seen with the skill and all the ability that he has.
Right. Now, you clearly like Bedard at 1, Michkov or Fantilli at 2. Do you have 2 other guys that are on your radar? Give us your top 5 if you can.
Well, to me, it's Bedard, Fantilli, and then Leo Carlsson at 3. And then I think Will Smith at number 4 to San Jose is really the perfect choice. They need that game-breaking talent, and he's going to do at least one season at Boston College. But I think the Sharks like that college route. You look at their management staff, Mike Greer, David Quinn, both did the college route themselves before they came into the NHL. So they understand how much that can help a player. So to me, that's your top 4. And then I have Michkov at number 5 to Montreal. So, however you want those guys to go, to me, those guys all have the look of elite level NHL talent once they are able to get into the league and establish themselves on their respective time frames.
So for Michkov, I just want to jump in on this one here. Would you say it's like the Kaprizov effect? They were waiting for him for so long to come in, and when he finally did, it was really blow the doors off kind of thing. Would you expect the kind of same level of play out of this gentleman if he does join the Montreal Canadiens or any team for that matter?
Right. Well, it's hard to say, as if he comes in 4 years, I believe he'll be 22. It's hard to say, okay, 22-year-old just parachute into the NHL and be a 40-goal scorer.
Yeah.
That's, it's hard to put that, and it's not fair to the young man to put that on him. However, based on the skill set that we've seen at 18, and if you sort of, project that upward, I think if that were the route and the right players are around him, I think there's no reason to think that a 30-goal season as an NHL rookie, I don't think that's beyond the realm of expectation if that's the way things play out. And that's saying if he stays healthy and if he continues to develop the way he's developing. Obviously, a lot can change between age 18 and age 22, whether you're a hockey player or not. So, that's sort of the line that he goes on if things stay the same. Whether they increase or decrease, remains to be seen. But if he continues on the development track that he's on, when he does come to the NHL, he looks like he can be a guy that, whether it's a Kaprizov level or not, he's a guy with elite level skill when he gets to the NHL.
Gotcha. Now,
all right.
Now, in terms of the draft, everyone has their projected picks here. Do you have any maybe hidden gems that no one's really talking about, or maybe some players that might be a little overrated?
Well, I think the guy that I'm really curious about outside of Michkov is when the first defenseman's going to go. And I believe it's going to be David Reinbacher, the Austrian-born defenseman playing for Cloton in the Swiss League. To me, he's very reminiscent of a Moritz Seider, just with the head for the game, the skill, the skating. He's not as big as Seider was, but he's 6'2" and 190 pounds. He certainly isn't going to be intimidated. He's played 2 years of men's hockey already in the Swiss League, played the World Championships, would have had a bigger bite at the World Championship, but he had a knee injury. On the Austria teams, it's going to be difficult for him. You're not going to really see the big counting numbers because they are overmatched going against the U.S., Canada, Sweden, Finland's of the world. But he looks like an outstanding young prospect. And in a draft where there are so many high-end talented forwards, there becomes a little bit of a law of supply and demand. So where is he going to end up? Is a team that thinks maybe it needs a defenseman that he might not be there at, the middle of the round. Maybe he goes a little bit higher just because, well, if we wait, we're not going to get the guy we want. So I think Reinbacher's a guy that's really interesting. I have him going at number 8 to Washington in my mock draft, just because I think at some point, they've added guys like Connor McMichael and Hendrix Lapierre the last couple of years in the first round. John Carlson's not getting any younger. They've lost Jonas Siegenthaler. They don't really have a real deep group on defense there. So maybe it's time to start building up that area of your prospect development system. I think Reinbacher is a good choice for Washington. However, if I'm Arizona at 6 and I have number 12 also in a draft deep in forwards, do you take the defenseman early, knowing that the forward you get at 12 isn't going to be that huge a drop-off from the forward you could get at number 6? So it's a really interesting, kind of thing there. How much value do you place on the position and how much value do you place on the player compared to what's going to be available around him?
That's true. I mean, I looked at a few mock drafts, and obviously you look at Craig Buttons and a few other guys. In the same spot, they got Wallander going to Washington at 8. As that type of defenseman. I wonder for you, everybody has their lists and their projections, and like Pete said, guys they like. Do you have someone that's kind of fallen down the draft rankings that was rated pretty high? That's maybe I wouldn't say not impressed, because all these guys are impressive. I mean, they put their life into this, and it's a lot of hard work going into it. But maybe someone who was ranked really high going into the season and kind of maybe has settled lower than a lot of people expected.
Well, it's hard to say because there are so many talented guys in this year's draft, and maybe somebody like Dalibor Dvorsky, the Slovakian-born center, is playing in Sweden. Some teams might have him ranked as high as number 5, number 4 on their list, going at number to the St. Louis Blues. That doesn't mean Dvorsky's any sort of a lesser player. It's just a matter of there's such fine little things separating these guys. Someone like Braden, between like a Braden Yeager and a Zach Benson and an Oliver Moore, Dvorsky, Nate Danielson, Ryan Leonard. There's so little separating these guys. It really is eye of the beholder. So if you could take 5 teams in their list from say 6 to 15, and you could see the same 9 guys if you ask another scout, but they'll be in a completely different order.
Yeah.
And it's just, I think when I saw this guy on this night, he was great doing this. When the other guy saw him on that night, this guy was better. There's so little to separate these guys. And that goes back to what I said earlier about this being such a highly skilled, very deep, very talented crop of players to choose from. It is very difficult to separate who's going to go where.
Okay. Well, that gets us to the fun part here. Obviously, being a Leaf-centric show, I want to ask you, the Leafs have the 28th pick right now by way of the Boston Bruins. The guy that I would like to see them select is Quentin Musty. I don't know if he's going to be available. Some people have him ranked pretty high. Others have him ranked outside of the first round. So I'm wondering for you, where do you have him slotted in? And is there a possibility maybe he falls to the Leafs? Because it looks like the Leafs have drafted defensemen and forwards. I think maybe another forward, maybe something they could use, especially on the left side where you're losing a Bunting and stuff like that. Might be good to slot him in a couple of years once he develops a little bit further. He does have a bit of size. What are your thoughts on Quentin Musty for the Leafs? Or is that just way too far-fetched? He'll be gone.
It's interesting you mentioned Musty. My colleague at NHL.com, Mike Morial, has Quentin Musty going to the Leafs at number 28 in our mock draft. That's sort of the sweet spot for a guy like him. Somewhere between 20 and 35 is probably the area where teams are looking at him. For me, I think Gavin Brindley is another guy who could fit the Leafs really well, just with the motor that he has coming out of Michigan. He's a natural center, but he played on the left side at Michigan on that line with Fantilli and Rutger McGroarty, the Winnipeg draft pick. And They were one of the best lines in college hockey this season. And a lot of that was because of Brindley, the energy that he brought to the game, the skill that he brought to the game. 28 points in 21 games after the World Juniors. He was scoring right on par with Fantilli there. So, and there's a certain energy and swagger that he brings to the game. Not that, other guys don't have it, but just in talking to Brindley and talking to guys around Brindley, they talk about the energy, the excitement, the enthusiasm he brings to the game. And I think it's something maybe the Leafs could use, assuming they keep that core group in place. Matthews and Marner and Nylander and Tavares, they could use a little bit of a guy with a high energy, high end, Brendan Gallagher type of attitude.
Ooh, I like that name.
So a guy who's going to be fearless out there, but a skilled fearlessness. I think that's what Gavin Brindley brings to any team he ends up with. Just that, that nonstop motor, that high end, high energy work ethic. He's a good penalty killer. I think he was I talked to his coach at Michigan and said he was the best penalty killer they had. And this is an 18-year-old freshman we're talking about here. So you're talking about a guy who brings a lot to the table, and on a team that maybe could use that little bit of sandpaper in the top 6 to go with the skill. I think Gavin Brindley would be a good fit for the Maple Leafs.
Well, the other guy that I was wondering, and I mean, the Leafs don't have a plethora of picks unless they spin a couple of deals here to get some more picks into their satchel. They have the 5th and the 6th pick they have round 5, round 6. Sorry, I'm looking at Jeremy Hansel as the overager from Seattle for the 5th round pick. Obviously 6 foot, 196 pounds. Really rounded out his game this year. was one of the better penalty killers in the WHL. Could be a pick for the Leafs. I'm wondering your thoughts on that one. That may be worth taking a flyer on, where he's an overager.
Well, for sure. And what you get with a player like that is the maturity of a guy who could fit into your lineup a little bit sooner, because it's a difference between drafting an 18-year-old and a 20-year-old. It's more than just 2 years on the age scale. You're talking about 2 more years of experience, 2 more years of maturity on the ice and off the ice. You remember how you were at 18 versus how you were at 20. There's a lot of development that goes on, a lot of maturity that goes on. So you're also talking about a guy you can put in the American League right away. He can step right into a pro system and just be able to start that adjustment to life as a professional, where it's your job. And it's not just your job, it's your life. And there's something to be said for that level of development, where you don't have the protection of a billet family or your mom and dad or whoever your living situation was. This is the real world. So when you draft somebody 20 years old, there's a little bit more that you're working with. So if that's the case, for sure, that's definitely worth taking a flyer on.
The other guy that I was thinking of too, in the 6th round, is Hoyt Stanley, another defenseman, obviously right-hand shot. They're kind of coveted. I don't know if you know that. Everybody says that from dawn till dusk. Again, he's 6 foot, 187 pounds, 38 points, 53 games. They say that if he's brought along the right way, he could potentially be a top 4D, but it would take some time and some work for him to get there. Skating is one thing that I think they want him to work on and bring up. But for Hoyt Stanley, in the 6th round, if you can get a project like that and have Paul Matheson, the Leafs skating coach, work with him there and really bring him along and up his game, that might be another, like I said, right-hand shot defenseman that you can add to your system and hopefully maybe turn into something.
Well, for sure. And the advantage of him coming out of the BC League is he's got, he's probably going to end up going to college somewhere. I'm not 100% sure where that's going to be, but that's, again, you're adding more to, he's going to go to Cornell. You're just, again, continuing to build up the development, allow him to get bigger, get stronger. It's one of the nice things about college hockey is it's a weekend league. So while you're only playing games Friday, Saturday, Sunday, you've got Monday through Thursday in the gym, practice, skills, and it's such a huge advantage. It really is a great route for guys who maybe haven't hit that development level physically, where they can just really lock in on gym time, getting bigger, getting stronger, adding muscle mass, as well as working on their skill set. And it's just a much more relaxed atmosphere. And, not to say there's anything wrong with, playing in the Western League, playing in the Ontario League, playing in the Quebec League, where you're playing an NHL style 68 to 72 game schedule with travel. But this, so it's everything, different paths. And it's funny, we're at the Combine, we had Connor Bedard, Adam Fantilli, Leo Carlson there to speak to us. And you're talking about 3 very different routes to get to the same point. You've got the Western League, you've got the NCAA, and you've got top end European route, but they're all going to get you to the same point. And it's what works best for each individual player. And I asked Adam Fantilli that, why college hockey is obviously he had a chance to play in the Ontario League. And he said, he goes to prep school and he enjoyed it. And his brother was there, and he went to the US League and he enjoyed it. And his brother was there. Obviously that certainly helped. And while he was in the US League, he visited University of Michigan and he fell in love with it. So it just happened to be the best path for him. For Connor Bedard, the best path was through Regina in the Western Hockey League. For Leo Carlson, it was coming up through the Swedish Hockey League. So, whatever the path works for you, the end point still has to be the same. So for whether it's Hoyt Stanley or any other player, college hockey, it's a great route. You'll see it with kids from the U.S. national team program. College works for them because it allows them to get bigger, get stronger, work on their skills in a different atmosphere while still getting high-level training. But the end result is still going to be the same. They all want to get to the NHL.
Right.
No.
So you mentioned college-level hockey. We see a lot of players developing there, especially one on our team, the Toronto Maple Leafs. Matthew Nyes. What are your thoughts on him? We've got a little taste of him. He looked fantastic, at least in our eyes. Is this guy going to develop into a superstar? Is he going to be as good as everyone's saying? Is there any other Leaf prospects that we should keep our eye on?
Well, I think as far as Matthew Nice goes, I think it's just a matter of let's just say metering expectations. I know how it's like I know how people in Toronto can get, and it's all honesty is really no different anywhere than anywhere else. Your guy comes in and he plays the way Matthew Nice played. You just kind of assume the best, and you have to be careful. You don't want to put the weight of expectations on him. If Matthew Nice comes in and he can score 20 to 25 goals next season, you should be very happy with that. If I'm a Maple Leafs
I'd be
fan,
happy with that.
I'm very happy with 20 to 25 goals in a support secondary scoring role.
It's pretty good.
And again, that's under the assumption that the big four are still there, right? If you can get that from Nice from a complimentary role, I think you're very happy with that.
From what we've heard so far, just to touch on Matthew Nyes and what he's doing with Auston Matthews, I guess he's with Auston Matthews right now, and the two of them are working together. And apparently, Mitch Marner is going to be joining them in July, so that line can really, I guess, work and mesh together. And I don't know if they've been told or things have already been said or whatever, but I guess they're kind of under the working impression that the three of them will work together. So he may get the Michael Bunting bump effect, where he may get, like you said, 20 goals, 60 points, riding shotgun with those two players, and that'll probably come with second power play time, obviously, to develop them there. But I liked what I've seen with him, with the ability to strip the puck and having confidence to do those things at a young age and just stepping in. So yeah, obviously the college road is great for development. And he must have been excited to step in and do what he did so far with the Leafs. And it was a shame to see him go out the way that he did, but I know he'll come back stronger and ready to roll.
Well, and then for sure, the fact that, and to your point, the fact that he was willing to, try certain things and play certain ways, that's what happens when you come in as a 20-year-old with 3 years of college experience. He wouldn't have that same effect if he came in at 18. So there's that opportunity to grow, develop, just work out the finer details in his game and become the player that he becomes, where he's able to step right into an NHL lineup in a very pressurized situation and perform and not look out of place. That was the biggest thing with Matthew Nice. He never looked out of place. You never were like, ooh, that's kind of a rookie, quote unquote, rookie mistake. He looked like he was a good fit. He knew what he was doing. He was comfortable. And that's half the battle, right? That mentally being able to say, I'm here. I should be here. I deserve to be here. Let's just go. And not thinking about where he should go or what he should do. We're wondering, you take the brain out of it and you just go. And I think that's where he was. And that's what made him look like he really fit in as a guy stepping into as I said, a very high pressure situation. He looked right at home.
No, he definitely did. There's a few other players, obviously, and Pete touched on it, asking about prospects there. Fraser Minton, Ty Voigt, some of these guys, they popped a little bit and had some, bubble underneath their name. Now they're going to be coming in, obviously, probably to the Marley situation. Another player that I've kept my eye on is Topi Nemela. Kind of excited to see what he may be able to do. Philip Kral with the Maple Leafs, just shoulder injury, took him out. I'm wondering, is there anyone that you see maybe in that group or in the Leafs group as a whole as a prospect that might be able to make a step? Because the Leafs are obviously going to need cheap, cost-effective guys. And wondering if there's someone out there.
And you mentioned one of them, Topi Niemela, is a guy that I've gotten to watch at World Juniors a little bit, and I thought he's a guy that really looks like he could be, again, in that secondary scoring role, who could be a help to a team. And Niemela is sort of the same way. I don't think you need him to be a guy who can carry a pair, but he's certainly got the size and the skill set to be a legitimate NHL player. I think a guy who, with the proper time to develop, it's a little bit harder for defensemen coming over. Obviously, he's probably going to need some time in the American League just to get adjust to the smaller ice, the more physical play in North America. But coming out of SM League, coming out of the Finnish league, I think he's got a chance to be a really nice player. I've watched him, here over the years, and I've always been impressed just by the head for the game, the skill set, the way he skates along the blue line and would run the Finnish power play, I think he's got a chance to be a decent player.
Oh, you got me excited. And I think that's why the Maple Leafs were kind of confident moving off of Rasmus Sandin with some of the guys they do have in the pipeline that can come up and maybe make an impact on the defensive side of things. I look at this draft for the Maple Leafs and say you got 3 picks. So obviously you might not hit any home runs, but the past couple of years, or few years, I should say, Nick Robertson's one of them. Fraser Mitten's another now, who people say may have a little substance to his name than Matthew Nyes as well. So I'm hoping they can get someone good, get someone just to add to the cupboard because the picks are bare. I want to ask you this one. With the Vegas Golden Knights winning the Stanley Cup with only one drafted player on their roster, which is not usually the way it goes. Usually teams build through the draft and get their superstars. Do you see teams using that model to go out and just acquire what they want, like Vegas has done? Because that's basically what they've done since they came in the league. They're very bullish. They see a player, they want a player. They don't care what the assets are, whether it's a Suzuki, picks, you name it, they'll get rid of it to get what they want in. Do you think long-term that is the right move to do? And I know they all want a Stanley Cup, so we can point to that and say Vegas got their cup, so maybe it is. But for long-term sustainability of a franchise.
Well, the short answer is no. I don't believe it's sustainable. I think it's for them and their situations very particular because they just haven't had the time or the opportunity to develop a prospect base.
Yeah.
However, I think that has to be the next move for them moving forward. I don't think you can survive long term just going through free agency and trading your future for your present before it catches up to you. And I think at a certain point, they do need to start developing their own talent, their own inexpensive talent, guys that can come in and be, more than just supporting characters. I think they need to draft and develop guys who can be impact players for them because you're not going to have William Karlsson and Jonathan Marchessault and those guys forever. I think they've kind of started that a little bit. I think Matthias Apovalov has a chance to be a decent player for them, moving forward. I think Brendan Brisson has a chance to be a good player for them moving forward here. I understand why you moved a guy like Peyton Krebs. I understand why you moved a guy like Zach Dean, to help you in the present when you have a chance to go for the cup. And they really wanted it and they got it and they got what they wanted. But the flip side of that is eventually you can't, I don't believe it's sustainable to continuously trade your future for your present, because at a certain point, the present's not going to be there for you. At a certain point, you're not going to be able to get a guy who can do for you what Jonathan Marchessault can do for you because you don't have the assets to give up to get him. Because it can't just be pick. They're going to want players. That's why St. Louis wanted Zach Dean when they moved Ivan Barbashev. That's why they wanted Buffalo demanded Peyton Krebs in that deal, when they made the Jack Eichel move. So you have to have young players either to come into your organization to help behind the older veterans that you have. Just to keep, that's how you build that winning tradition. Is you don't just have a free agent cast of guys that you sort of bring together. You need to draft and develop and let those guys grow behind them to eventually replace them. And that's how winning consistently comes around.
Yeah, no, I fully agree with that. That's why I led it with saying, most teams do build through the draft.
To do what they did the way they did it, I think that was more of a unique situation.
Yeah, I mention it like that because the NHL is such a copycat league that everybody looks at everything. And now also the other flip side too is people will look at the Tkachuk trade and say, hey, maybe we send one of our kind of guys out and bring in 2 players, and who knows, maybe it blows up in both teams' faces. I still think that Calgary will get a pretty good shake out of the deal they got with Weegar and Huberdeau. But again, the copycat league thing, it stands. Teams do it. So I'm hoping we don't see a whole bunch. But I mean, at the sideline thing, trades are cool. So I mean, if you see a whole bunch of trades going on, everybody will get excited. But yeah, no, I fully agree that building it through the right way is the best way to go. Well, before we wrap up with you, we do have our 5 burning questions brought to you by our friends over at Boxing Rock Brewing Co. They're pretty fun little questions. I want to ask you question number one. Which player impressed you the most at the combine? It could be physically or it could be behind the mic talking to you guys. Which player kind of just made you go, wow, this guy's got it?
That would be Tom Willander, the defenseman from Rogla in the Swiss League, who's going to end up at Boston University in the fall. Just a guy that I just watching him on video. You see a very mature, very poised player, really good skater, and then you get to meet him in person, and he's bright, well-spoken, knows where he wants to go, what he wants to do, and what needs to be done to get there. And you can't spend 5 minutes around the young man and not be completely impressed with who he is, how he handles himself off the ice, certainly, and then you watch him on the ice. He looks like he's going to be an elite level player, within very short order. I talked to his coach out in Rogla, and they believe the same thing. They thought he could have played on their team this season, but because he was dead set on going the NCAA route, he could only practice with them. So I said, how was he in practice? And he said he was so competitive, guys on their team would kind of skip to the back of the line when he came up to the front because they just didn't want to deal with the competitive nature of the kid. And again, he's 18, he's 6'1", he's 175, 180 pounds. So he's put together pretty well, can still get a little stronger, but the skating, the physical, he plays the game with an edge. He's good in all areas of the game. He can defend well, skates outstanding, but he's a guy that really impressed me just from getting to talk with him for a little bit. And I'm going to have a story on NHL.com here in the next couple of days, so you'll be able to read more about Tom Willander there on NHL.com.
We'll have to check that out for sure.
Awesome. Now, you may have already answered the next question here, but was there an answer to a question from the Combine that really impressed you? Like there was a really good interview from one of the players?
You mean just the interviews that I had with them or the interviews that they had with NHL teams?
Give us both.
Either or, just like an answer from one of the players that's kind of like a good one, whether it's from you guys or from anywhere that you may have heard. That's just a great answer.
Well, I think, I'll put it this way. So we had Adam Fantilli on our Draft Class podcast, and we asked him right off the hop, what are you doing next season? And he gave just the perfect non-answer answer where he was just like, and some guys would sort of get a little deer in the headlights, but he's like, no, I'll make my decision when I make my decision. I'm not going to say yay or nay either way. So I thought that was pretty impressive, and he sort of handled it the right way. And my feeling is he's going to go back for one more year of school. That's just the impression that I got just from talking to him and then hearing him talk in other situations, other outlets, that he thinks he, maybe needs another year of college. We talked to Brandon Naurato, the coach at Michigan, and obviously he's a little biased. He would love it if he stayed for 4 years, but obviously I don't think that's going to happen. But I think there are still things that he wants to accomplish in college, and I thought he gave us a pretty good answer. As far as what we heard from NHL teams, we always ask the guys, what did you get anything goofy, silly, strange? One of the ones we heard was Matthew Wood, the forward from University of Connecticut, said he was asked, what would you want people to say about you at your funeral? But that was a little interesting.
Yeah.
And he was like that, he's, well, what did you say? He's, well, just that I was a good person, a good, husband / father, that kind of thing. So, nothing out of the ordinary. And I think that was really it. This wasn't a big year. Like in years past, I've had guys say, they would ask me what the longest river in Canada is. I don't know.
Just trying to
and they would, and they would ask all the kids that, whether they were Canadian or not. And it was just sort of, well, how do you react? I guess it's more to test, like, how do you react in strange situations on the ice, unexpected situations on the ice, off the ice? Yeah. I don't know. So and no, if you're wondering, I do not know what the longest river in Canada is.
Don't worry, neither do I. And I'm here. We're all right. I gotta ask the biggest shock for you that you've seen at a draft, whether it's a trade or a pick. This will be question 3. So biggest shock, whether it's a trade or a pick that you've got to kind of experience or either soak in, like, whoa, okay, that just happened.
Well, I think, it would have been. I don't remember. It was the year Boston ended up with 3 picks in a row. And I think that was, I want to say it was 2012, because we were on the bus in traffic, stuck on the media bus waiting to get there. And we're all scrolling through, and we all got the notification that Dougie Hamilton had gotten traded. And that's how they got their third pick. And we're like, wait a minute. So they have 14, 15, and 16? Has that ever happened before where a team's got 3 straight picks? So that was a little bit of a stunner there, just kind of sitting and waiting and wondering, like, all right, this is a little unique. Are they going to use all 3 picks? Are they going to take 2 of them and try to move up and try to go farther up the ladder? And then, we all know what happened after that. They took DeBrusque, Zaboral, and Senyshyn, and the next 3 picks in somewhat, I don't remember the exact order, was Barzell, Kyle Connor, and Thomas Chabot. So, if you're a Boston fan, maybe not the most shining moment for you, but that I remember that whole process being like, this is a little different. We might not see this again anytime soon.
No, that's a pretty big one for sure.
Awesome. Now, for question 4 here, is there like a story that maybe you heard of, or maybe there's just a really funny story from your coworker at the draft? Is just something that pops into your head here?
So my first draft was 2008 in Ottawa, and the night before, so this is day 1 of the draft, night 1 of the draft. Kurt Overhart, I believe, was the agent, sent a note to all 30 teams and released it to the media that David Carl, the now the head coach of University of Denver, at that point was a defenseman for Shattuck St. Mary, had a 2nd round rating, probably would have been a top 50 pick. Had been forced to retire from hockey because of a heart condition. Wasn't going to be life affecting, but he wasn't going to be able to play anymore, and he was removing himself from the draft.
Okay.
Yeah. So he's out. So fast forward to the next day. It's a 7th round. We're 3 picks from the end. Tampa says, we select from Shattuck St. Mary's David Carl. My boss and I look at each other, and he goes, that's a story. Go find out what happened. So I immediately run down to the Tampa table, and Jay Feaster was the general manager at the time. And but Jay was on his way out because Orrin Cools and Len Barry were about to take control of the franchise, and they were in the process of bringing on Brian Lawton as the general manager. So I went to Jay, and I had a good relationship with Jay. I said, Jay, tell me about David Carl. And he's like, that's Orrin's pick. Okay. So I motion for I grab a hold of Tampa's PR guy because Orrin was there. He was at the table, and I said to Orrin, I said to their PR guy, I said, I need Orrin. He's okay. Brings him over, and I said, I introduced myself. I said, Orrin, please explain to me the David Carl pick. And he kind of started to hem and haw, and he couldn't really get the words out. And then he became very emotional. And then he became very emotional to the point where there were tears. And he just, to gather himself, he just kind of walked away. And I just stood there with the PR guy. And after a minute or two, the PR guy came over to me and said, Orrin's not available. And that was it. And if you know Orrin Cools, at the time he was, and this wasn't, he wasn't blowing me off by any stretch of the imagination. He was just too emotional to speak. Orrin Cools was the producer of the Saw movies, the horror movies. So all I can think of is I went back to our little, because we have a little private spot at .com at the draft every year. And I said, I made the guy from the Saw movies cry. And that was, and it's funny. Earlier this season, I wrote a story on Steven Stamkos getting 500 goals and 1,000 points in 1,000 games all this season. And of course I had to talk, because I want to talk about where they were when they got Stamkos in Tampa to where he is now. And of course I want to talk to Orrin, fantastic guy. I found him on Twitter, had a great conversation. Of course I had to ask him, can you, and I took him through the whole thing, and he had a chuckle. He said, look, I knew the kid's story. I know what he went through to get to this point. I wanted to give him a moment. I knew we were it's a 7th round. It's 3 picks from the end.
I got chills.
The guy's not going to, the guy we take with that pick, there's like a 1% chance of him ever doing anything. Yeah. We can do that, or we can give this kid his moment. And his decision was to give the kid his moment.
That is amazing. I love it. That's one of the best stories I've ever heard.
That's amazing. I'm glad we asked that question. That's awesome.
Yeah.
But you don't hear about those things too much either, right? So
right.
Those little behind the scenes things. So that's amazing to hear. And yeah, like Pete said, I actually got goosebumps right now. So that's a wicked story. The last one we have is it's about Connor Bedard. And I want to just get your gut feel here. because there's all kinds of different levels that we put these players in that are supposed to be coming up that are the next big thing. They have the tags of generational, elite, superstar, or star. If you had to wager amount of money, an imaginary amount, on what type of player Connor Bedard will end up being by the end of his career, I know crystal ball looking, will it be the generational type, the elite type, the superstar, or just a star?
Well, I would say, you know, Sidney Crosby has played 18 years. He's got 1,500 points. I would have to say if Connor Bedard can stay healthy and if he can have a 20-year career in the NHL, I would think, 1,400 points. I don't know if that's out of the realm of possibility. If you look at where he is now and the projection as you play it forward, he's a guy that, no, he does not have the dominant NHL size. He's never going to be built like Fantilli at 6'2" and 100 and close to 200 pounds. But the head for the game, the skating, the vision, the elusiveness, and as good as it is now at age 18, it's only going to get better and better and better. You guys have Austin Matthews in Toronto. The Austin Matthews that we see now at age 25 is far different from the Austin Matthews you saw at age 18.
Very
so
true.
If you look at Connor Bedard now, and remember, he's still only 17 years old. He's not going to turn 18 in for another month.
Yep.
So not only is he the best player in this year's draft, he's one of the youngest. So if you look at where he is now as a player and you continue to project along the lines of development, I think, if he stays healthy and he has the players around him to, get the most out of his talent, I think we're looking at a guy who has the chance to be a foundational elite player in the NHL for a long period of time.
Oh.
And however you want to call that generational superstar, whatever label you want to put on it, I think that's the player he looks like he's going to become.
No, it's going to be good for the Chicago Blackhawks. I mean, for their fans anyways. I don't want to talk too much about the organization at this point, but
I think it's good for the NHL. It's good for the NHL because you're not just bringing in a great player, you're bringing in a really good person. Because if you ever sit down and listen to Connor Bedard, and you can go back and you watch his interviews at the World Juniors, I was there for it, and he had this magical tournament, the fourth most points of any player who's ever played in the World Juniors, utterly and completely refused to talk about himself. Yep. He has that highlight goal against Slovakia that we're going to see ad infinitum every year on TSN, and he wouldn't talk about it. He said, "We won the game. It's all that matters. I have my gold medal." When we asked him what the highlight of his season was, it was getting to the playoffs with Regina because he hadn't been there before in the Western League. It was winning the gold medal at the World Juniors. It wasn't 70 goals. It wasn't 140 points. It wasn't WHL Player of the Year. It wasn't CHL Player of the Year. It was team accomplishments. So he's a smart, well-spoken young man, comes from a great family. I've had the chance to speak with his father. I know we've written stories on his mom on .com. They're good people. He comes from a good family. He was raised right. He's going to come into the NHL. Listen, he's got some swagger to his game. He's not a choir boy. He's not a Boy Scout. He's got some good energy to his game. I remember we talked to Carson Bjarnson, the goalie from the Brandon Wheat Kings, and we're like, well, what kind of chirping would you get? And he said, Bedard would say, "I had top corner. You just got lucky." So he's got some of that to his game, which is nice, which you want. Yeah. You don't want bland, you don't want milquetoast. So he's got some personality to him. So he's a good player, he's a great player, and he looks like he's a great person. So I think it's great for Chicago and it's great for Blackhawks fans, but it's also great for NHL fans because you're bringing in that level of talent with who's a really good person.
Yeah, well, the NHL needs those players. Obviously, you look at like a Sidney Crosby-esque kind of player who just, top notch, does everything asked of him, does all kinds of things behind the scenes as well, really helps grow the game and take care of people and fans alike. So, yeah, if Connor Bedard comes in, does the same ilk, and has his little swagger, but still is able to go out and do all the right things and say all the right things, I think that's great as well. And then for me, I'm a big guy that believes the NHL needs more personalities, needs more flavor. Less bland is great because I missed the fun of the PK Subans or the Ovechkin hot stick that everybody got upset about. I love those moments, and I wish we had more of them each year.
I'll tell you a great PK story. Covered the World Juniors in Ottawa the year they won the 5th straight gold medal, and I remember standing on the media rise, not the interview area, the mix zone, and PK was still playing in Belleville, so he was still a Montreal prospect, and I believe it was RDS was there. They were interviewing him, and he said, "Hey, can we do this in French? I'm taking French immersion. I want to try this interview in French." And they're like, "Are you sure?" He's like, "Yeah, give me the mic." And they asked him a couple of questions, and it was very halting and very limited French. But I remember just watching that from the side and thinking, he gets it. This is a young man who gets it, who understands it. And I didn't know much about PK Subban at the time. I knew he was a nice prospect, but I see that, and just then you just watch him in that overflowing level of energy and enthusiasm. He was fantastic. I know some people had issues with him, the triple low 5 or whatever he did with Carey Price.
I thought it was great.
Phenomenal.
Yeah,
I thought it was phenomenal. He was a great player, and another one, a great person. Look, they don't put your name up on a wall in a hospital ward unless you're a great human being. So to me, PK Subban, he was great for the league. He was great for whatever team he played on. And now I think he's done really well on TV for himself. Yeah, I think more guys like PK Subban would be good. Yeah, and I think, I don't know if Connor Bedard's going to have that level of energy and enthusiasm, because that was kind of rare.
Yeah.
However, I think he has the right kind of swagger and the right kind of personality to be very good for the NHL.
I love that, man. I'm looking forward to the draft. I can't wait to see everything shake out. Can't wait to see where your projected list ends up being as you cross it off as the players go. But I would love to have you on throughout the summer, pick your brain about where players went and what we talked about. But I want to thank you very much, Adam, for taking the time and jumping on with us this week to talk about the draft coming up.
Absolutely, guys. It was fun.
All right, well, ladies and gentlemen, this right here is Offside Hockey Talk, where the Maple Leafs and hockey come to talk.